What's up, family? This is Kristen Smallwood, and you're listening to the Thrive with Joy podcast, a special space I've created for us to come and reason together. Each week, I share life lessons and stories that challenge our perspective on how we're managing the relationships with ourselves, God, and others. I'm even inviting some special guests to help us unpack insights on how to experience lasting, harmonious bonds that abound in grace, forgiveness, and love. Let's get into it. What's up, family? Thank you for joining me back in the room for another episode. Now, I don't know about you, but one of the things I love to do is people watch. Like, I can go to the park or the mall, or even while I'm in a restaurant or in a store, and I'll find myself sometimes just watching people, how they act, how they move, and I'll start building a story in my head about who that person is, what probably brought them to the store or park or restaurant. And if they are with somebody else, I'll even start playing out the conversation that I think they're having with the other person. Anybody else ever do that? Like, I think it's the writer in me that draws me to this activity. You can consider it a part of my character development process. Like, sometimes I just have to go out in the world and observe people in different environments so I can build inspiration for characters that I want to end up in my stories. So I went to visit my oldest sister one time, and we ended up going out to Red Lobster for dinner. Now, this is when Red Lobster was still good. Like, when the seafood still tastes like actual seafood and not like jackfruit. And they would give you that hot cheddar biscuit fresh out the oven. You know, back in the days when going to Red Lobster was actually a thing. So we're sitting in the restaurant waiting for our food, and my brain kicks into people watching mode, and I start observing the people in the tables and booths next to us. Now, instead of being selfish and having this whole moment by myself, I decide to cue my sister in on the tables that I'm watching so we could observe together and compare notes. So there are three couples in the area where we were sitting. The first couple, who I can only assume were husband and wife, had to be every bit of 70 plus years old. They had gotten to their table before us, so they had already received their food. So they were sitting across from each other at the table, and they would eat a little bit, then they would just sit, then they'd eat a little bit more, and then they'd just sit. Like, their table was completely silent. They weren't talking to each other in between eating. They weren't looking at each other. They were barely responding to the waiter. Like, there was so little movement going on at their table that we almost walked over there and took their pulse. Like, I told my sister, I'm nervous that these two might really be dying right here in front of our very eyes, and we don't even realize what's happening. I was seriously about to get up and do a wellness check at their table because they were not engaging with each other at all. Then there was another couple behind them, probably in their mid-30s, early 40s. Again, I can only assume that they were married. We weren't close enough to really make out whether or not they had rings on, but it was a woman, a man, and a little girl. So the man was sitting on one side of the booth, and the woman and the little girl were sitting on the other side. So the little girl had the kids menu, and she was coloring on it, and the woman was hovering over her and trying to have little conversations with her and encouraging her to, keep doing a great job on her artwork, clearly focused on keeping this little girl distracted and entertained until their food hit the table. Now, the man was on the other side of the booth talking on the phone, and whoever he was talking to, they had his full attention. He was completely engaged in that conversation. Now, every now and again, the woman would look up at him and hit him with this look that said, okay, it's about time for you to wrap that call up. But we could tell that he was not moved at all by her stares because he would just keep right on talking. Then there was this third couple, young girl and guy. They had to be all of 18, 19 years old. I mean, still had the high school smell on them. They were sitting in the booth side by side, and they were all over each other. I mean, feeding each other bread, playing in each other's hair, all hugged up on each other in the booth. And so the waitress was trying to hand them their food, and they didn't even want to stop holding hands long enough to grab the plates. They were so busy smiling and laughing in each other's face that they didn't even notice when she was trying to get them to hand her their cups so she could refill their drinks. Like, the waitress was sick of them. She was looking at them like, y'all should have just DoorDash your food and stayed at the house. So me and my sister, we're looking at all these different scenes play out, and we're laughing and we're coming up with all kinds of stories about each couple's lives and how they ended up at Red Lobster that night. And so I asked my sister, I said, which one of these couples do you think is the happiest? And she says, probably the older couple. Because we had already assessed that the younger couple probably hadn't even experienced real love yet. And what they were experiencing was more than likely infatuation, which is why they were all over each other and they just couldn't get enough, right? Hence the overt public displays of affection. Like we were both interested in seeing how they would respond to each other when real conflict hit that relationship. And then the second couple with the little girl, well, it was obvious that they were already having some underlying issues in their relationship, given the way the woman was sending those sharp, nonverbal signals to her partner, who was determined to ignore her, by the way. But as for the older couple, we both agreed that they had probably been together for so many years that they probably didn't even feel the need to communicate with each other. They were just so comfortable just being in each other's presence without even having to engage. It was that, or they were actually having a medical emergency at the table and we just weren't responding to it. But nevertheless, that conversation made me wonder how great it must be to be so comfortable and settled in a relationship that you don't even have to talk to the person to enjoy their company, like years after you've been together. But then it also made me ask the question, is there ever a time in any relationship where communication becomes unnecessary? And what happens when our lack of communication leads to unmet expectations? Now, I had an opportunity to think through these questions even further when I observed an incident between another couple during a recent gathering. So here's what happened. There's this married couple that had been together for a couple decades now. Great couple. They sincerely love each other, committed to their marriage. They've raised their kids together, and now they're supporting their next generation by helping raise their grandkids. Just all around really solid people, right? They live in peace. Their marriage is not perfect, but they don't waste time arguing and bickering with each other, and it's clear that they're in it for the long haul. So we're at this gathering. It's getting late, and it's time to start bringing this event to a close. It's been an amazing night, full of laughter, great food, reminiscing, and just connecting with loved ones that we don't get to see that often. So everyone starts to chip in and help clean up. And the host is telling everybody, please take this food with you. Pack as much and as many plates as you want. I do not want to be left with all this food because no one is going to be here to eat it, and it's going to end up being wasted, right? So on command, people start happily packing plates, trying to follow the instructions we were given. The wife jumps up and follows suit, starts grabbing a couple to go plates to pack her and her husband some dinner for tomorrow. Now, the husband doesn't move because he's confident that his wife is going to take care of him. He knows there is no way she's going to make herself a to go plate and not make one for him. And he was right. She packs both of them a to go plate and even makes a dessert plate for them to share. So she's feeling good because she knows she has fulfilled her wifely duties for the day, right? They get back to their residence and he starts to put the plates away. And he notices that not only are the plates heavy, but it's three of them. So he's excited. He's like, oh, she must have hooked us up. Like, we're going to eat real good tomorrow. So he opens up the plates, and all of a sudden, all of his excitement turns into sheer confusion. He turns to his wife and he's like, where are the yams? Like, I've opened all three plates and I don't see not one yam in here. I see turkey, I see greens, I see dressing, I even see cake and pie, but where are the yams? Did you leave another plate in the car that we didn't grab, or did you put them in a sandwich bag that may have slipped and fell between the seats? Like, because surely we didn't leave an event that served yams and you didn't give me none. Like, were they all gone? And she was like, no, I didn't know you wanted yams, so I didn't put any on the plate. Now, if ever there was a time where he questioned whether or not they should be married, that was the moment. because he was completely taken aback by her response. He could not believe she said that. He was like, "What do you mean? You didn't know if I wanted yams? How long have we been together? I've been loving yams since before I loved you. You know that's one of my favorite dishes. I ask for it all the time. And not just that, but these were special yams. These are my auntie yams. I can't even get these on an average day. And no offense to you, but your yams can't even cook in the same oven as hers. Like, seriously, when her yams are around, yours got to go in the microwave. Like, that's how special these are. And you didn't get me none? So the wife, she's speechless, completely speechless. Like, it never crossed her mind that he would react this way. She felt like she had really dropped the ball on this situation, and she didn't know how she was going to make it right. So for at least 24 to 48 hours, that marriage was plagued with disappointment, discord, and the state of the family was really in jeopardy. Okay, he was hot about them yams. But did he have a right to be? See, this happens often in relationships, whether it's husband and wife, parent and child, manager and employee, friends. In every relationship, there are what we call implicit expectations, which are those expectations that are implied but never verbalized. In other words, there are things that people expect you to just know. And based on the nature of the relationship, they don't feel like they should have to tell you what those things are, but they're absolutely going to hold you accountable to meeting those expectations. Here's a perfect example. You have a parent who tells their child, "I need you to clean up the kitchen before you go to bed. And when I get up in the morning, that task better be complete," right? So the parent goes to bed, wake up the next morning, notices the kitchen does not look the way they expected it to. From what they could tell, the food had been put away, the dishes had been washed, but the countertops hadn't been wiped off, the floor hadn't been swept, there was still like random items sitting on the table, the trash hadn't been taken out. So they hit the roof. They start yelling at their kids saying, "Didn't I tell you to clean this kitchen before you went to bed?" And the kid is like, "Yeah, I did. And they're like, "No, I put the food up and I washed the dishes." And the parent's like, "No, that's not cleaning the kitchen. You were supposed to sweep, clean off the table, take out the trash, put the food up, wash the dishes." And the kid says, "But you didn't say all that. You just said, clean the kitchen." And so the parent fires back and says, "I shouldn't have to say all of that. You should just know. You've seen me clean this kitchen before. You know these are all the things that I do when I clean it up. So you should have done the same thing." Now, here's the challenge the parent is running into in this scenario. They have assumed that because their child was observing their behavior all of these years, that they were also learning those behaviors, which made them feel comfortable in assuming that their child would replicate those behaviors when it was time to act on them. Listen, it's never good to assume that because someone is watching you or has seen you do things for years that they're actually learning your ways and intend on putting those things into practice. Sometimes they're just looking. Sometimes they are watching to determine what they aren't going to do. Like, I remember I sat in the kitchen and watched my grandmother make homemade gravy for years. And to this day, I can't make gravy from scratch to save my life because I wasn't trying to learn. I was simply observing her. So if she had ever asked me to make the gravy for dinner, I would have completely disappointed her because she would have quickly found out that I was not observing her to learn, but I was just observing her to watch. Like, I had no forethought that I should be trying to acquire that skill so I could use it when she was gone. Now, I don't have a chance to observe her. And I regret the fact that I blew all of those opportunities to learn more from her. Just like that husband, he assumed that because his wife saw him eat and ask for yams all those years, that she was capturing that information as a lesson that she needed to learn so that she would always make sure he had some when they were available. But are these fair assumptions? Like, how do we avoid the disappointment that comes from our unspoken expectations of other people? Here are a few things that I've had to learn when I found myself faced with these challenges. The first lesson I had to learn was make no assumptions when it comes to people understanding what you need and want from them. Nobody is a mind reader. Like, if you have not clearly communicated what it is that you expect them to do and or not do when it comes to you, then you should always be prepared to be disappointed. Because let's be clear, even when you do communicate those things, there are still going to be times when people fall short and don't meet the mark. That's why grace is so important. But if I don't even know what it is you expect of me, the chances that I'm going to show up for you the way you need me to are slim to none. More often than not, right, people that have been together for a while tend to more easily pick up on the unspoken needs of their partners because they have probably had to deal with the consequences of not picking up on those cues in previous exchanges. So now they're more alert and they're more attentive to the things that are not being said. But I don't care how in tune you are with the person. It doesn't matter how many years y'all have been together. Whether you're like that young couple from Red Lobster that couldn't keep their hands off each other, or that older couple that looked like they were barely breathing, things change. What you needed from me yesterday may be totally different than what you need today. And if you don't bother to communicate those updates with me and you assume that I'm just going to know what those changes are, you have put me at a disadvantage because I'm still operating off of old information. That communication really goes both ways because I'm changing as well. So if my ability to meet your expectations shifts and I don't tell you about it, then eventually we're still going to bump heads, right? I could make the assumption that the reason why the wife didn't put any yams on the husband's plate is because she didn't have a desire for any yams herself. And because she no longer had a need for it, she left it off of all the plates. So maybe it was not an intentional slight to him, but more of a unconscious shift in her thinking that resulted in an unmet expectation, right? Like maybe she started making her plate first and realized she didn't want yams, so she completely removed herself from the area where the yams were. And when it was time to make his plate, she probably didn't remember the yams because it wasn't something that was important to her. So because sometimes our inability to meet your spoken or unspoken expectations is a direct result of the fact that our needs changed and we adjusted to accommodate those changes. And again, unless you have clearly stated to me that this is what you want or expect from me, I'm going to do what feels right for me in that moment. So you have to eliminate assumptions and be prepared to communicate your needs clearly and often. Because the second thing I learned was even when you do communicate your needs and expectations, you are still going to have to advocate for yourself to make sure that those needs get met. Like I remember facilitating a career development class, and I was sharing some tips on things that employees could do to identify the best next steps for their career based on their interests and their needs. And one of the trainees began to share that one of the problems that they kept running into when they were trying to advance in their career was the fact that they had been working at their company for over 10 years and they felt like they kept getting overlooked for advancement opportunities. So I asked them, I said, what are you doing to put yourself in a position to be recognized for those opportunities? And they said, well, I'm doing my job. I come in, I do everything they ask me to do. I meet my performance quotas. I'm on time. I don't have any disciplinary issues. And I just want to be, rewarded for my work. They said, I feel like my boss just gives other people the chances to work on special projects and assignments that I don't get to do. And I don't think it's fair. So I said, okay, cool. Let's talk about it. When do you get paid? They said, we get paid on the 15th and the last day of the month. I said, okay, 2 times a month. Now, you talked about not being rewarded for the work you do, but you do realize you get rewarded 2 times each month for the work you do, right? The reward you speak of is called a paycheck, right? Because you're supposed to go to work and do your job. They expect you to meet your quotas, to be on time. and to not have any disciplinary issues. And so as a result of you meeting those basic expectations, they give you a check. I said, so in essence, your company has been doing exactly what they committed to do for you. But what it sounds like is that you really want growth opportunities beyond the paycheck. You want to grow, you want to learn, you want to have new experiences, right? They were like, yeah. I said, okay. So when is the last time you asked your boss to be a part of a special project or communicated to them that you were even remotely interested in doing anything outside of your assigned work? And they couldn't tell me because they had never had that conversation. They were just expecting the boss to come to them and offer them these opportunities. And I told them, you're upset with your boss because they're not meeting an expectation you have of them that they don't even know you have. I'm sure you're not their only employee. Now, a good leader would be intentional about initiating those conversations with their employees and making sure that if you did have a desire and an ability to do more, then they would try to provide you with those opportunities if it made sense. But not every boss is a good leader. So instead of waiting for them to come to you, you should be explicitly communicating what it is that you want to do and how you could use their support to help you meet your career goals. Find out if there's a reason why you haven't been presented with these opportunities in the past. In other words, you want yams? You better ask for them. And if you ask for them, you have to prepare for the fact that they still might not end up on your plate. Your boss still may not provide you with those advancement opportunities you're looking for, but at least you know it's not because you didn't communicate the need. Now you have enough information to make a more informed decision. Do you stick around and wait to see if they'll accommodate you? Or do you look for other opportunities outside of your current role? It's ultimately on you to make sure that whatever needs you have get met. And then the last thing I learned is sometimes you have to inspect your expectations. We view the world from our own perspective. When we set expectations for other people, we typically gauge what they should be doing based off of what we would do. Like we want them to be us. Everybody wants reciprocity, right? It's the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So if I have a family member or a friend who I know is in need, I'm going to check on them. I'm going to try and find out how I can help. And if I can help, I'm going to do it. But when I'm in need, I'm expecting them to do the same thing. Check on me. Help me if you can. But I'm learning that sometimes you have to ask yourself the question, is that the right expectation to have of that person? I'm expecting them to do what I would do. But would they? Could they? Is it in their nature to reciprocate the love that I show to them? Is it within their ability to show up for me the way I show up for them? Maybe they really want to help, but they just can't. So is it right for me to hold them to a standard that I already know they can't meet? Because if I do, I'm setting myself up to be let down every time, and that relationship will always be strained. Sometimes people can give you the best of who they are, and it's still not enough to meet the needs that you have. That's when you have to adjust your expectations of that person. It's only fair. I have a friend who is a true introvert. If she could live her life totally isolated from people and still successfully raise her family, she would be just fine. She doesn't want to hang out and be around a bunch of people. She don't care about having small talk and building a bunch of relationships. You don't have to invite her to a bunch of events because she'd rather not come, right? Well, I'm an extrovert. I draw energy from being around people and I enjoy spending time with family and friends. So when we became friends, I had an expectation that she would match my energy when it came to those things. So I'm inviting her to come hang out and let's go meet my other friends and let's take some girl trips and let's do all of these things that extroverts love to do. And she was like, nah, I can't do that. I'm not built like that. Those things energize you, but they drain me. I'm cool with me and you meeting up every now and again for dinner or lunch, but I can't take a lot of people. Like, I need alone time to recharge. We can talk on the phone all day, but I have limitations when it comes to in-person interactions because I have to save my energy for my husband and my kids. And I was like, wow, this is new for me because all of my other friends are extroverts or at least have extroverted tendencies where they're totally cool with hanging out and spending time together. But I can't hold her to the same standard that I hold them to. I have to meet her where she is. Otherwise, I would be angry with every time I invite her to an event and she doesn't show up. So when she already communicated to me very clearly that she could not commit to doing that consistently, I had to honor that. It doesn't mean she would never show up. It just means if I don't look for her to fill that need, then I won't be disappointed when she doesn't, and the relationship won't be negatively impacted. Now, once I've assessed what a reasonable expectation for that person is based on who they are, how they are, and what I know about them to be able to do, then we're able to set the appropriate boundaries for how our relationship should work so that we can avoid unnecessary conflict. Listen, the moral of the story is this: communication is still king. As much as we would all like to bask in the idea that people can read our minds and understand exactly what we need from them at any given moment, that's simply not the way it works. In order to avoid the trap of disappointment and heartbreak in our relationships, it's always necessary to keep the lines of communication open and active. We must all find the courage to have the hard conversations and boldly share what it is that we need so we can rest peacefully in each other's presence. Be open to the reality that some of our expectations may be out of reach for those we need the most, and adjustments may be required to keep that relationship in good standing. As the saying goes, closed mouths don't get fed. Your voice is one of the most powerful tools you own. So if you're hoping to be satisfied with the meal you're being served, you better speak up. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to share it with a friend. Post about it on social media, or feel free to leave a rating and review. And of course, follow or subscribe to the Thrive with Joy podcast on your favorite streaming platform: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts, to make sure you're notified when new episodes are available. All new episodes are released on Mondays. Until next time, family, I pray that God bless you to live in peace and thrive with joy.